What is the meaning of the Olympic Games? And what have they got to do with Hercules? Hello, my friends. Welcome back. So, I'm now speaking to you from the remains of a Roman kiln. Up in our field, there was a Roman settlement here in southern Britain nearly 2,000 years ago. So, a fitting location to speak to you about one of the Roman Empire's favourite heroes. I'm talking, of course, about Hercules, or Heracles, as we would have him in the Greek. So the Olympic Games are going religious or mythological context to all of this running and jumping and throwing discs and all of that. So the very first Olympic Games was supposedly, according to a very early myth, set up by the Greek hero Hercules or Heracles. So the Olympic Games in history were running from, I don't know, the 8th century BCE to sometime in the 4th century AD, in the Common Era. So over 1,000 years, these games were running in Olympia in Greece. There was running, there was jumping, there was discus, there was javelin, there was boxing, there was wrestling. So a lot of these things are still going on today. We've lost chariot racing. We don't do that one anymore. Sadly, that would be great. That early date for the beginning of the Olympic Games, way back in the 8th century BCE, that's sort of the earliest date in history. But some say that there was an earlier mythological games that was revived in the 8th century, and this is the one that was started by Hercules. Hercules, possibly the most famous of any hero in world mythology, the club swinger, the lion skin one, the strong man. Hercules, he was deified, he was taken up to Mount Olympus on his death and became one of the gods, Hercules, son of Zeus. So Hercules founded the first Olympic Games, according to myth, in honor of his father, Zeus. And I'm sure he won all of the titles because, come on, it's Hercules. But the thing we all know about Hercules is he was very, very famous for his 12 labours or his 10 labours. And a lot of that sort of has parallels with the Olympic Games. So, for example, before I get into a very, very quick run through the 12 labours of Hercules and then maybe some of the psychology and comparative mythology behind that, Hercules is said to have invented the art of boxing and wrestling. See, if you, like me, enjoy watching a bit of boxing and you've been watching that in the Olympics, Hercules invented that. Hercules, in his first labour, he had to defeat the Nemean lion, and he used wrestling and boxing to do that. He punched that cat to death and then strangled it. So when people do the boxing today or the wrestling, that is literally rooted in mythology. And there's a sort of psychological underpinning to this. The lion usually represents the aspect of humanity that is maybe imperfect, subject to emotions, to hunger, to violence, to carnal lust. This is all the lion, and Hercules overcame that element, that all too human element in himself. That was part of his deification. You might want to compare the tiger skin that the Indian god Shiva sits on. That tiger that Shiva has pacified represents the sort of sense desires and carnal lusts that Shiva, as the ascetic, has overcome. Very similar thing going on here. Different kind of cat, but similar idea. So a bit of a dive into the mythology of Hercules then. I'm going to get onto the labours in a minute because that's the bit that directly relates to the Olympic Games. But Hercules, as I've already said, he was the son of Zeus with a mortal woman, a queen. And Zeus came down and assumed the form of her husband, the king, classic, slept with her. Then when the king arrives later, he's thinking, you're behaving a bit weird. So that's how Hercules or Heracles was born. And as you can imagine, this really pissed off Hera, the queen of the gods, Zeus's wife. That incidentally is where Heracles gets his name from, the glory of Hera, in an attempt to pacify her so she wouldn't keep trying to murder him, which she does throughout his life. He eventually wins her over. That's the story here. So when Hercules was a baby boy, he had a twin brother called Iphicles. He was the mortal twin, son of his mortal father. Heracles was the divine twin. You could say the psychological interpretation here is Iphicles is the human part of us, the ego that is frightened and greedy, and Hercules is the divine portion that exists inside of all of us, the hero principle. So Hera is pissed off that her husband again has been sleeping with a mortal woman, and this Hercules is an insult to her. He represents her husband's infidelity. So she sends down two snakes, this is a classic myth, to kill these two boys. Iphicles, being the human part, shrieks in fear, but when everyone rushes into the room, Hercules is strangling those two snakes in his bare hands. Very old image, this, of a divine figure holding two serpents. I'm sure you can think of a lot of other images that may serpentinely intertwine here. Another incident in Hercules' early life, by the way, Athena takes the baby Hercules up to Athena to suckle at her teat. She doesn't know who he is. And Hercules, obviously being a strong, virile boy, bites so hard on her nipple that she screams and pushes him away, and then milk spurts out over the whole dome of the sky and creates the Milky Way. So another origin story for the Milky Way there. But Hercules has now absorbed, superhuman tit milk. He's now got superhuman divine strength. So he goes back down to his mummy and daddy. When he's growing up, he shows a lot of prowess in athletics. He's very good, at chariot racing, at fighting, all of that stuff. He's less good at more the artistic stuff. He's a bit crap at the lyre. In fact, he's so bad at the lyre that his music teacher berates him and gives him a cuff around the head. And Hercules loses his temper so badly that he beats his music teacher over the head with his own lyre, and he's dead. So he's banished, and he has to be a shepherd in the mountains. At one point, he fights off a lion with his bare hands. So he's a fighter, not a musician, and he shows early on that he's got a big temper. This is one of the qualities. This is one of the qualities of Hercules. He's really human. Like, yes, he's semi-divine, but he's lusty. He's quick to rage. He's not really good at everything, but he is good at fighting. He's a really human figure. That's probably why he's so popular. So Hercules eventually finds a wife and has kids. And he comes home one day from whatever he's doing, and he finds his children are nowhere to be seen. And then monsters and serpents start slithering out of their bedchamber, and it's clear that these monsters, sent by Hera, have killed his family. And he flies into a rage and kills these monsters. And some of them try and slither away, but he chases them and breaks their necks. Only then does Hera remove the illusion that she's put on Heracles, because it was, of course, all Hera's doing. And he realizes that these monsters are in fact the broken bodies of his wife and children. He is absolutely broken. So Hera has tricked Hercules into murdering his own family. So he's broken. This is the wasteland. This is the underworld for Hercules in terms of the hero's journey. Now, eventually he makes his way to the oracle at Delphi, who tells Hercules that the way to atone for his sins is to go to his cousin. His cousin's name is Eurystheus. He's also a descendant of Perseus, like Heracles. But he's a bit of a dick. He's a bit of a crap divine child. So Hercules, obeying what the oracle says, and the oracle is obviously Hera, Hercules goes to the palace of his cousin and submits himself before the king, Eurystheus. He turns himself into a slave as a form of atonement. This is the act of service. This is so important in so many heroes' journeys. This is sort of the heart of the matter. And many people interpret all these labors psychologically, in terms of these psychological trials and tribulations that we all as humans have to go through in our own divine journey, if you will. So, the 10 or 12 labours of Heracles. Number 1, I've already mentioned, the Nemean lion. So, Hercules has to slay this lion. It's sort of an obvious symbolic one. It's, as I've already said, representative of all of his kind of carnal lusts and his temper and all of his animal instincts that is part of our human nature. Thing is, though, this animal can't be pierced by weapons, so Hercules has to punch it to death, or strangle it to death, rather. This is, as I've said, the origin of boxing and wrestling in the Olympic Games. Not only that, but he has to skin it, to flay it, which he has to do with one of its own claws, because that's the only thing that can tear its skin. Once he's done that, though, he can wear the skin on his shoulders, and he's wearing the protective skin of that lion. He's wearing the skin of his accomplishments. When he goes back to Eurystheus, who obviously expected him to die, he's very, very, very frightened. Some legends say he hides in a big pot. So whenever he talks to Heracles from now on, he's kind of hiding in a big vase, which is quite a comic and deeply symbolic image. So that is labour number one, the lion. Labour number two, the Hydra, the Lernaean Hydra. So Hercules goes, he has to slay this multi-headed snake. Isn't that a metaphor for so many of our problems and issues? Every time we try and kill the shadow, it comes back in two forms. That's why you should never banish the shadow to the long black bag we drag behind us. We need to incorporate it in some way. That's a very old mythic idea. So Hercules is cutting off these heads and they keep regrowing. And as if that's bad enough, while he's fighting this Hydra, this massive crab jumps out of the lake behind him and starts giving it all that, trying to kill Hercules. Luckily, his companion slash lover, Aeolus, is there and starts, firing arrows into the Hydra's bum to distract it, so Hercules can smash the crab, and then the two of them together finish off the Hydra, Hercules cutting off the heads while Aeolus cauterizes the wound. Second labour, done. Except he was disqualified in true Olympic fashion for that one, for cheating, because he had help. He wasn't allowed any help. Aeolus helped him, so he's going to have to do another labour at some point. But that's the second labour. Third labour, the Sirenian hind. May not have pronounced that right. It's a deer with golden antlers, a female deer with golden antlers. Some people suggest maybe this is a reindeer. It's not. It's a deer with antlers. So this deer is incredibly fast. It's sacred to the goddess Artemis. Hera's hoping that Hercules will piss Artemis off by catching or killing it, and then she'll kill him. It can also run faster than a speeding arrow. So Hercules is pursuing this deer for a year and a day, and eventually, through trickery, through cunning, he manages to trap it, to jump out and catch it. Who does he bump into when he's carrying the deer out of the forest? Obviously, Artemis, queen of the wild hunt, mistress of the wood, with her brother Apollo, god of the sun. And she's like, "Oi, what are you doing with my deer?" And he says, "No, I've just got to complete these 12 labours. I'll bring it back, I promise." And she says, "Fine." Hera is obviously a bit pissed off about that. So he brings the deer back to Eurystheus. He says, "Oh, I'm having that." And Hercules says, "Well, come and get it then." He lets it go, and bing, it shoots off like an arrow. Labour completed. The fourth labour is the boar of Cirencester. Let me know in the comments. So, a lot of mythic animals here. So Hercules catches the boar. I think he drives it into snow where it slows down, captures it. I don't know what lust or emotion it's representative of. Maybe you guys have an idea. So that's another labour done, the fourth labour. The fifth labour is cleaning out the Augean stables. They haven't been cleared out of excrement for many, many, many decades. Huge mountains of crap that Hercules has to clear out. It's going to take him a long time, but he has to do it in a day. What does he do? He makes a big wall, a hole in the wall of the stables, and diverts two rivers through it, so it cleans away all of the shit. Unfortunately, though, Hercules was also disqualified from this labour because he accepted payment to do it. He asked for 10% of the king's divine cattle or whatever. Disqualified. The next labour of Hercules was the Salian Birds. So these are some birds that were created or sacred to Ares, and they're very, very nasty, sort of man-killing birds. They've been tormenting nearby villages. They're all hiding in a big bit of woodland on an island in the middle of a big lake, so Hercules can't get at them. So what does he do? He's given some castanets by Athena that were made by Hephaestus, and he kind of makes this terrifying sound and echoes it off a mountain and bounces it over the lake, like a big speaker, and he spooks all these birds and they fly off into the air, and then Hercules shoots them all down with arrows that he's previously dipped in the blood of the Hydra with poison, so he kills all them birds. So that's good. Another labour ticked off. He had help, though, I hear you say. Obviously, Eurystheus didn't hear about the help that was given him, so he gets away with that one. Labour number 7, the Creton Bull. This, my friends, is no less than the great bull of heaven itself, the primordial cow that was there at the beginning of time. We've heard about this in many world mythologies. Maybe its milk made the Milky Way, who knows? This is the bull that Poseidon sent out of the ocean to King Minos to sacrifice, and King Minos, very naughty boy, did not sacrifice it. So Poseidon made his wife go mad with lust and have sex with the bull, so she gave birth to the Minotaur. It's that bull. You know the bull I mean. He's kind of a big deal. So Hercules goes to Crete, and Minos, fair enough, the bull's shagged his wife, so he's like, take the bull. So Hercules thinks that was easy, takes it back to Eurystheus, done. Eurystheus doesn't know what to do with the bull, so he releases it and it starts causing bloody havoc, but that's another story. Next labour. Labour number 8, the man-eating mares of some place. These are man-eating horses. So what Hercules does for this labour is he isolates them on an island, and then he feeds the horses their own owner, their king, because he's a bit of a dick, and they eat him, and then their appetite is a bit quenched, so he can kind of tie them up and take them back to Eurystheus, and then they piss off somewhere and get killed by wild animals on the slopes of Mount Olympus, something like that. Labour number 9. It starts getting weird here, guys. This is Get, the girdle of Hippolyta. Girdle is like a belt. It was given to her by Ares, god of war. Hippolyta is the queen of the Amazons, badass fighting women. Hippolyta is the son of Ares, the god of war. She's kind of a big deal. Hercules goes with just one ship, with a few, men, and speaks to Hippolyta. And obviously, she has the massive, massive hots for Hercules, and they get it on, and she gives him her girdle, you know what I mean, giggity. Unfortunately, Hera thinks that's way too easy, so she turns herself into an Amazon and starts stirring up gossip that Hercules has come to capture Queen Hippolyta. So they all charge onto the bow of that ship with weapons drawn, start killing people, and Hercules has no choice but to start smashing them, and in the process, he accidentally, I assume, kills Hippolyta. Takes her girdle back to Eurystheus. That labour is done. Next labour. Capture the sacred cattle of Geryon. Geryon is a 3-bodied giant. Doesn't that mean he's a 3 giants? I don't know. 3-bodied giant that lives beyond the pillars of Hercules. So the Hercules are the Straits of Gibraltar. So Hercules sails out beyond the Straits of Gibraltar into somewhere in modern-day Spain or Portugal. He has to do a load of stuff, but finally he defeats this 3-bodied, monstrous giant, smashes him with his club, and leads the cattle back to Eurystheus. These labours are starting to get strange now. Perhaps these are representative of some sort of getting towards the end of one's life. These are kind of a big deal. They're dealing with sort of death and the afterlife. The 11th now labour of Hercules. Get the golden apples of immortality from the garden of the Hesperides. That is also beyond the pillars of Hercules in the garden of Atlas, who is holding up the sky, the Titan holding up the sky. He's got 3 daughters, 3 nymphs, and they look after, tend this garden, and there's a tree growing in the garden with golden apples guarded by a serpent. Interesting myth this. I'm sure you'll be noticing the resonances with a lot of other myths, maybe Idun's apples from Norse mythology, and of course the apples of the tree of knowledge of good and evil in the Garden of Eden, which is of course guarded by a serpent. Is it Satan? Is it divine Gnosis, Sophia? A really interesting myth there about the origin of us, about the origin of man. So that's the clue here in this Labours of Hercules, how important Hercules is. He's us, he's humanity, and symbolic of our journey towards our own self-deification. The Garden of the Hesperides. It's somewhere in the modern-day Morocco, in the Atlas Mountains. I will show some images of that area now, because I went there earlier this year. So behind me is the house of Hercules in the Roman city of Volubilis in present-day Morocco. That would have been in the Roman province of Mauritania. So many of the labours of Hercules took place in present-day Morocco. So he was a venerated figure, Hercules in this part of the Roman Empire. So, Hercules eventually finds his way to Atlas's place. He can't quite find the garden, so he goes to Atlas himself. And Atlas says, "Don't worry, mate, I'll get the apples for you if you'll just hold the sky up for me for just a moment." Hercules, probably sensing that Atlas was up to no good, but seeing he had no choice, holds up the very celestial dome of heaven itself, while Atlas goes to get the apples, because he's allowed, of course. And then, hang on, he has a little idea, and he says to Hercules, "Why don't I deliver the apples back to your cousin for you?" And Hercules says, yeah, great idea, thinking very quickly. You do that, but hang on a minute, if I'm just going to carry this for you to make that journey, can you just hold this a minute while I just adjust my cloak or put a little cushion on my neck, just to support the weight? And Atlas thinks, yeah, sure, idiot. Takes it up, and then Hercules, vamooses out of there. This is really interesting because we often think of Hercules as a kind of a brute thug, and in many ways he is, but this is Hercules displaying trickster energy here. Interestingly, one of the other Greek figures that also self-deifies himself is Hermes, a much more trickster from Greek mythology, who is the grandson of Atlas and another son of Zeus. Hercules is his brother. So, Zeus also has that hermetic trickster quality. Maybe he's developed it later in his career. Maybe that's the lesson for us. You can't just solve things by brute force. Sometimes you need a bit of trickery as well, and to incorporate that. One more labour number 12 for Heracles. None other than going into the underworld, into Hades, into hell itself, and stealing the three-headed guardian of the underworld, Cerberus, from under the nose of the Lord of Death himself. Well, down Hercules goes into the underworld, and instead of sort of overpowering the dog, he actually goes to Hades first and asks Hades permission, who presumably says, yes, you can take him, just don't kill him, but you have to, wrestle him first. I want to watch that. So Hercules wrestles the dog of death, the three-headed dog of death, takes the dog of hell back to the palace of Eurystheus, who freaks out and says, your labours are done, please just take the dog away. And he does so. Hercules takes it back to Hades. Job's a good un. So there, my friend, are the 12 labours of Hercules. And this was such a popular story across the Mediterranean. The Romans really took this story on. Earlier this year, I saw a mosaic of Hercules in the city of Volubilis in the very south of Morocco, or the very south of the Roman Empire, down in Morocco. This kiln I'm sat on now built Roman Cirencester and Roman Britain, which is surrounding me. Hercules was an incredibly popular figure in Roman Britain as well. In fact, the Romans told us that when they arrived on this island, he was already being worshipped. Probably would have been obviously a local variant, not the actual Greco-Roman Hercules, I presume. But clearly, this is the hero of heroes. This is almost the, I hate this word, the archetypal hero of man, So in terms of the Olympic Games, if we're watching any of the rest of this over the next, spectators is watching a kind of ritualized version of the labours of Hercules, which itself is a kind of mythic version of the journey of self-betterment that we all go through in all of our lives. So I think that's about enough today, my friends. That is the story of Hercules and his 12 labours and how he started the Olympic Games. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you to my Patreons. I'll see you next time.